The room hums with that peculiar electricity that only appears when rules, egos, and cameras are all switched on at the same time. Papers rustle, staffers whisper over highlighted lines, the gavel rests like a coiled spring, and every microphone is a fuse waiting for a spark. A single phrase keeps flashing across minds and monitors, read the rule. Because in a hearing like this, language isn't just communication, it's leverage, and leverage is what turns 5 questioning blocks into battlefield terrain. The air is dense with competing aims. One side wants a tunnel with bright lights at the end, short questions, specific dates, a yes or no that pins the witness to the board, while the other side wants a balcony view, a wide frame that places any accusation inside a larger story about principle, double standards, or public accountability. The friction between a tunnel and a balcony is the real soundtrack of these showdowns. A crisp demand for documents collides with a sweeping claim about fairness, and before anyone can exhale, attention shifts from evidence to etiquette, from substance to structure, and then to hinge where power actually swings, who gets to speak, who must yield, and whether the rulebook will be used as a brake, a shield, or a slingshot. The phrase, "read the rule," is the key code for that hinge. It can be honest housekeeping, hold on. Let's verify whether this language is out of bounds, or it can be tactical theater, hold on. Let's slow an opponent who's building momentum. Either way, uttering it snaps a hearing from heat back to text, from accusation back to clauses, from the unruly present back to the printed past. That is why the room always leans forward when it lands. Members know that once ink appears, the clock behaves differently. The person with the page, the precedent, or the patient voice often gets the next 30 seconds, and in an age where clips crown winners, 30 seconds is a throne. What follows is the choreography of modern oversight. A pointed question meets a reframing answer, the questioner presses for precision, the answerer insists on context, a third voice invokes point of order, the chair weighs the request like a scale balancing mercury, and the audience, on the dais and online tracks, the geometry of control more than the geometry of truth. It's not cynicism to admit this, it's literacy. Hearings are a place where truth must compete with time, and time is rationed by rules. Watch how composure is performed. Hands anchored on the dais when the goal is to look judicious, forefinger on the mic. Plate when the goal is to look authoritative, head tilted toward the chair when the goal is to borrow institutional gravitas. Tone carries as much freight as text. A measured cadence can make a razor sound like a ruler. A raised voice can make a fact sound like a flame. And yet, even the sharpest voice must answer to the same gatekeeper every time: recognition. Recognition is the oxygen of a member's argument. Without it, words are just air. That's why procedural words appear with surgical timing. Mr. Chair, point of order, parliamentary inquiry, I reclaim my time, the gentle lady will suspend. Each phrase is an instrument on a very small operating table. Play the wrong instrument at the wrong time, and you cut the wrong artery, bleeding momentum onto the floor. Play the right one, and you cauterize the wound, sealing your opponent's best line inside a formal ruling that makes their energy evaporate. Here, the conflict over decorum is never merely about politeness. Decorum is a custody battle over the clock, and the rulebook is the custody judge. Claims of personal attack, imputing motives, or speaking out of order are not only moral accusations. They're strategic bids to force a decision that either restores a questioner's path or blocks it. With bright tape, the public hears "be civil." Insiders hear who owns the next minute. When read the rule is deployed, two things happen at once. The room performs accountability for the cameras, and the participants reset the narrative terrain. If the text favors restraint, the person pushing hard must pivot or risk the chair's rebuke. If the text is ambiguous, the chair's interpretation becomes the new fact of the moment, and everyone recalibrates around it. None of this is abstract. It determines whether a witness answers, whether a line of questioning survives, and whether a member leaves the dais with a clean caption, ready moment, or a muddled backhand, forth that smells like confusion. Even the physical props matter. The highlighted page raised at chest level functions like a warrant. The printed rule number in a lower, third graphic functions like a badge. The gavel, even silent, functions like a threat against chaos. In that tense, theatrical environment, every decision feels like precedent, every sigh like dissent, every smile like strategy. The floor becomes a courtroom without a jury, except the jury is at home, watching, clipping, judging. They don't hear all the words, they hear the arc. Challenge, dodge, confrontation, payoff. That is the rhythm that wins, and the rulebook is the metronome setting the tempo. So when two practiced combatants collide, one accelerating toward granular proof, the other broadening into principle, heavy framing the phrase "read the rule" decides whose style dominates. If the chair sustains the call, the scalpel slows and the hammer looks disciplined. If the chair overrules, the hammer looks hasty and the scalpel cuts on. Either ruling can be spun as victory if the follow-up is deft. Skill in this arena isn't just about winning the point. It's about claiming the meaning of the point before the cameras blink. The secret most viewers learn after watching enough of these exchanges is that hearings are fights over two kinds of legitimacy at once: the legitimacy of facts and the legitimacy of form. Facts answer questions, form decides who gets to ask them, and because the committee table is a scarce resource, 5 minutes at a time, no carryover. The smallest form victory can amplify or erase an entire fact pattern. That is why tensions flare, that is why voices overlap, that is why the chair's simple sentence, "The gentle lady will suspend," lands with the weight of a verdict. In the aftermath, everyone claims a win and moves on, but the real scoreboard is quieter. Who adjusted fastest, who kept their story intact under procedural pressure, who forced a reading of text. That will travel as far as any zinger. The rule isn't an afterthought, it is the skeleton under every viral moment, the thing that keeps the body of the hearing upright or proves that parts of it are too flimsy to stand. And when the phrase surfaces again, as it always does, it isn't just a call for manners. It's a demand to anchor fire to ink, to test passion against precedent, and to make the most valuable commodity in a hearing time. Bow, however briefly, to words that were written long before today's tempers ever rose. Strip the spectacle down to its bearings, and the mechanism reveals itself. A hearing runs on 3 layers of authority: the House rules that set the baseline, the committee rules that tailor the baseline to the room, and the chair's on-the-spot interpretations that convert paper into practice. Read the rule pulls all 3 layers into the open. The request implies there is an applicable text. The text implies there is a standard. The standard implies the chair must declare how that standard governs this exact second. Underneath, the physics are simple. Speech moves forward unless the rule says stop. Time belongs to the recognized member unless a proper interruption is allowed, and proper interruptions are rare enough that everyone fights over the definition. That's why certain incantations carry such weight. Point of order is a tool for claims that a rule is being violated. When sincere and in order, it can pause the action. Parliamentary inquiry is a question about procedure. It does not confer the power to interrupt questioning just to make an argument. Mixing them up is either a rookie mistake or a deliberate bid to freeze the clock. Meanwhile, I reclaim my time. Is not a magic wand. It is a reminder that recognition belongs to the member who had the floor, unless the chair has genuinely shifted control because a valid point has been raised. The chair's repeated "will suspend" becomes an oral fence. It corrals voices back into the structure so the record can proceed. Within this structure, decorum is often misunderstood as a vibe. It is in fact a set of boundaries meant to protect both inquiry and dignity. Accusing a colleague of lying, impugning motives, or launching personal insults are not mere lapses in politeness. They are violations that can derail the committee's purpose. Hence the tactic, when a line feels like it's slipping into ad hominem, read the rule, brings out the chalk to redraw the field. The brilliance, sometimes the cynicism, lies in timing. Raise decorum too early and it looks like thin skin. Raise it too late and it looks like surrender. But raise it when the other side is peaking, and the temperature must pass through a bottleneck of text. That bottleneck changes breath and cadence. The member who thrives on rhythm loses their drumbeat while the clerk or chair reads aloud. The member who funnels questions into a tight box may suddenly find themselves answering for tone instead of the witness answering for facts. The audience, always hungry for clarity, senses a change. Is this about evidence or behavior? If behavior wins the minute, evidence must win the next. The best players know how to pivot on that fulcrum tighten language, lower volume. Choose one sentence with 3 nouns and no adjectives. Then move the spotlight back to the original question. Before the rule call becomes the story, time, of course, is the scarcest commodity here. The 5-minute allotment forces economy. It tempts grandstanding and punishes rambling. It creates the illusion that the questioner is in control until a properly lodged point of order steals the oxygen. That's why yield strategies matter. Yielding for a question that is actually a speech is a rookie error. Yielding for a quick corroboration from an I can cement a frame. And when recognition is returned, a practiced voice doesn't rehash the detour. It resumes mid-aught, as if the interruption proved the point rather than erased it. That narrative discipline is what pulls a clip into coherence. In the age of captions, lower thirds, and instant uploads, coherence is currency. A 20-second read the rule. Incident can still produce a clean, persuasive cut if the voice resuming control names the rule, concedes its applicability, and then extracts a lesson from it. See, boundaries exist. Now within those boundaries, answer the question. This is how process and persuasion coexist. Respect the fence, then run faster inside it. Because cameras are everywhere, props and micro-tells matter more than they should. The highlighted page is proof of text. The underlined number is a lighthouse. The moment the chair says overruled or sustained is the bell that traders wait for on a trading floor, sending each side to sell their story. Even breath becomes rhetoric. A long exhale signals self-control. A clipped intake before speaking signals determination. Overlapping words signal escalation. Every signal combines with the rule call to shape perception. Who looks constructive? Who looks opportunistic? Who looks prepared? Who looks rattled? None of these impressions change what the rule actually says, but they change how the rule lives on outside the room. And that outside life is the point. The hearing is both governance and theater, and the best performers are those who treat the text like choreography rather than a nuisance. They know a sustained point of order can be judo. Use it to flow into a calmer, sharper question that benefits from the attention the dispute just created. They know an overruled objection can be turned into a humility beat. Noted, Mr. Chair, that makes the next push sound measured, not manic. They know that if words are stricken, the internet still remembers. So the real win is not to erase sound, but to define it. Beneath all this technique is a civic insight worth protecting. The rulebook is not the enemy of passion. It is the structure that keeps passion intelligible. Without structure, the loudest voice wins. With structure, the clearest argument has a chance. Read the rule is an insistence that the argument be legible. It forces translation from heat to ink and back again, and anyone who can operate that converter in real time will seem unflappable even when tempers blaze. That is why some clashes live beyond the news cycle. They showcase not only what was said, but how the saying was governed, what the boundaries were, who tested them, who used them to advance rather than evade. When the day ends, the scoreboard isn't measured in decibels. It's measured in outcomes. Did a witness answer something they hadn't planned to? Did a committee place a fact in the record that can guide policy or oversight later? Did a member lay down a precedent, small, perhaps, but sticky, about how far tone can go before substance is suffocated? Those are wins that don't always go viral, but they shape the next fight's terrain. And yet, the viral age cannot be ignored. Clips compress complexity into archetypes. The enforcer of order, the slayer with receipts, the defender of decorum, the champion of free inquiry. Read the rule, hands a label to whoever wields it best. Wield it as a scalpel, and it looks like care. Wield it as a cudgel, and it looks like evasion. The chair's steadiness decides which reading prevails. In a perfect world, the chair is audible gravity, pulling everyone back to orbit, granting rulings in a cadence that signals fairness, refusing to let invention masquerade as inquiry or outrage. At argument, when that happens, even the fiercest opponents end up sharing something rare, a frame that's strong enough to hold disagreement without shattering. That is the quiet victory behind the loudest nights. Fire meets ink, and both survive. The next time the phrase rises, as it surely will, the lesson is simple. The power of a hearing isn't in how hot it gets. It's in how well heat is conducted through rules that were written to keep the light on. Here is the final lens to bring every moving part into focus. The exchange isn't just two lawmakers colliding in a moment of heat. It's two theories of persuasion attempting to govern the same minute, and the minute itself is governed by rules that are older than either of them. One theory says precision is mercy, ask for the date, the memo, the signature, and force a clean answer that clarifies the public record. The other theory says context is justice, show the pattern, the double standard, the wider consequence, because isolated facts can mislead if they're not nested inside their true scale. Precision without context can feel like a trap. Context without precision can feel like a dodge. The rulebook exists to stop both from becoming tyranny. When Read the Rule surfaces in a Crockett-Mace clash, it's a referendum on which theory is behaving. If the precise question begins drifting into motive, calling, the text snaps it back. If the wide framing starts to erase the actual question, the same text reduces the canvas until an answer has fit. That's why the chair's ruling matters more than any single barb. It picks the stage size, and once the stage size is set, the side that prepared for that dimension tends to look like the adult in the room. Preparation, more than personality, is the quiet engine of these victories. You can hear it when a member cites a section number without looking down. You can see it when a binder opens to the exact tab, and a highlighted sentence appears on cue. You can feel it when the voice doesn't lunge for volume after a setback, but settles into a sentence that sounds like it belongs in the record. That's what audiences respond to, even when they can't name it. Control. Control of words, control of time, control of the transition from outrage to order. The truth is that hearings are not designed to crown heroes. They are designed to produce auditable lines that future investigators, journalists, and citizens can follow. A viral moment is only honest when it rides on top of something the clerk could read back and everyone would recognize as accurate. The reason this particular matchup crackles is that both players try to plant that kind of moment under the hottest lights possible. One will escalate with a tight question that dares the other side to interrupt. The other will escalate with a decorum claim that dares the chair to choose. The temptation for viewers is to declare a winner based on who looked stronger. The better scorecard is simpler. After the smoke cleared, what new fact entered the record, or what boundary was clarified so the next witness knows where the lines are? If the answer is none, then all we saw was athletic yelling. If the answer is something durable, then the confrontation did its job even if your favorite didn't get the last word. Durability is the real prize. A date confirmed under pressure, a policy effect quantified on camera, an ethical line reaffirmed by a ruling. Those items travel farther than any insult because they can be used tomorrow. And that is where read the rule has an almost paradoxical power. It can feel like a detour, but it often lays the pavement for the next mile. The member who rolls with the ruling and refocuses on substance shows a kind of discipline that audiences trust. The member who treats the ruling as a personal affront tends to burn seconds and sympathy simultaneously. If you rewind the best hearings, you'll notice the difference. The decisive moments are not the loudest, they're the cleanest. Clean exchanges survive clipping, travel across timelines without distortion, and remain persuasive even to people who arrive skeptical. Messy exchanges gratify the already converted, but rarely move anyone else. Clean requires rules. That is the unglamorous math behind a glamorous clip. There's another layer worth naming before the final bow: the staff. Behind every poised 5 minutes, there's a small army of researchers, counsels, and communications aides who anticipate exactly when a rule might be invoked and stack the right receipts within arm's reach. They are the ones who tape a sticky note to the page that reads "Decorum, personalization prohibited," or "Scope, questions must remain germane to the subject under inquiry." They are the ones who script the pivot lines that sound spontaneous, but are actually built to regain narrative altitude after a procedural descent. When you hear a member say, "Noted, Mr. Chair, within those bounds, here's the question," you're listening to choreography. That choreography isn't cynical. It's the way representative government keeps passion compatible with process. No one wants a hearing so sanitized that nothing human survives it. No one benefits from a hearing so chaotic that nothing verifiable remains. Staff exists to keep the human and the verifiable in the same frame. And it's here that a final lesson for viewers emerges. Judging these showdowns as if they were pure improvisation misses half the skill on display. The skill is in knowing the rulebook well enough to appear effortless when it interrupts. The skill is in using the interruption to polish, not punish, your next sentence. The skill is in recognizing that cameras remember everything, so dignity is never wasted, even when it looks like a concession. Dignity is the currency that buys attention from people who didn't plan to agree with you. So, what does all of this mean for the clip you just watched, or the clip you're about to see framed as "Read the Rule"? It means the moment is bigger than a dunk and more consequential than a meme. It means the institution is doing the unglamorous work of forcing disagreement to speak through a filter that future Americans can still understand. It means that the two figures at the center of the storm, one sharpening questions into keys, the other testing frames for strength, are both negotiating with a third actor that doesn't yell but always decides the rule. The rule doesn't humiliate, it calibrates. It doesn't end debate, it makes debate intelligible. It doesn't crown a side, it crowns a standard. When the standard is visible, confidence rises, not because one team won, but because the audience can see that even the fiercest arguments are held by something sturdier than mood. And that is the cornerstone of trust. People do not demand serenity, they demand structure. Give them structure, and they can tolerate heat, complexity, even moments of unfairness, knowing that the next ruling, the next 5 minutes, the next witness, arrives inside the same frame. That continuity is why hearings messy, emotional, clipped to pieces, remain one of the last places where public life can still be audited. The final takeaway is plain. If a line is sharp, it should survive the rule. If a frame is fair, it should welcome the rule. If a witness is honest, the rule will protect their answer from being drowned by performance, and if any participant depends on confusion, the rule will eventually starve them. That's the gravity that keeps this orbit from flying apart. The lesson for anyone who wants better politics is not to wish away the sparks. It's to insist that every spark be wired into light. The way to wire it is to respect the text, endure the ruling, and use the regained time to ask something the country didn't know before today. When that happens, when the question tightens, the answer lands. The chairs gavel guides rather than silences. There's a different kind of viral moment available, not the crash, but the click. Instant when millions recognize that a complicated issue just became one notch clearer. That click is rarer than outrage, but it lasts longer. It is the moment that lingers after timelines move on, and it's the moment that justifies the heat. So let the phrase rise again the next time tempers flare. Let it call the room back to the boundary that makes persuasion possible. Let it anchor fury to fairness and force every participant questioner, defender, and decider to carry their weight in words that can be read back tomorrow. In the end, that's the only victory worth keeping, a record tough enough to stand when the shouting fades. Read the rule, then resume the pursuit. If clarity entered the ledger tonight, that's the real win, and if the ledger stayed blank, the rule will be waiting at the next clash, ready to shrink the chaos until an answer fits.